Hindi na. Hi everyone! Welcome to CRC, to the C, CRC, Stays at Home! This is Ethan, my son, and I'm Elden, and we are from CRC. I just want to share a few things today. I've got two things in fact to share with you. Some reflections even as we are quarantined in our homes. The first point of reflection I have is with regards to raising these children in times like these. So for many of us, we are often in our normal weeks busy with work, busy with ministry, and with regards to taking care of our kids, we're just trying to make ends meet, right? We're just trying to make sure that they have clean clothes, food to eat, making sure that they're educated as per normal, right? They're learning the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. But we have very little time to actually educate them about God or to present the reality of God in their lives. And so in this time of the COVID-19 lockdown, I've had the time to reflect on how I myself have been doing so with regards to educating him about God. The irony in one sense is even for us church leaders, many of us don't have that much time to also educate our kids about God. And I think this week has made me realize that I need to put in more effort and also to see how I can keep it up for the times that I'm busy after the COVID-19 lockdown is removed. So for most of us, as I said earlier, we live our lives just trying to make ends meet from Monday to Saturday. And on Sunday, when we are at church or after Sunday school, we're reminded of teaching them about God, and so we incorporate some God talk in their lives at the weekend, right? But that should not be the case, right? For us, we should be presenting the reality of God in their lives throughout the week. And so I have a few suggestions of how you can do so and how I'll be trying to incorporate this God talk in his life more throughout the week. So for example, most of us will pray around meals, right? When we're having a meal together, we'll pray together. So standard will apply, no digital, equipment, no phones, no gadgets. And most of us will just readily pray with them. But I would encourage you to do more than that. I would encourage you maybe as you're about to eat, and now since there's more time, maybe you can bring out like a picture Bible or bring out a Bible storybook, and you can talk to them about different things about God, about how He's creator, about how they are sinful, about Jesus. More so if your kids are older and they're already asking questions about, let's say, the coronavirus, you can talk to them about God's judgment and His sovereignty. Right? You can bring in some examples from the Bible, some stories, like for example the flood. Okay, you can bring in the example of the Exodus and how God defeated Pharaoh, and you can give some New Testament examples as well about Jesus and how He is in control over death, demons, disease, in revealing Himself to be the Messiah, right? So we have all these good stories, good examples that you can bring up from the Bible and to show them that this reality still remains today in our world. Other examples would be, let's say for him, right, when he sees a bird outside, he goes, "Bird," right? And for most of us, we go like, "Yeah, look at the bird, look at the sky," But if you were to incorporate more God talk because you have more time, and don't just do it during the coronavirus lockdown, but beyond that, you can say stuff like, "Okay, well, who created the birds?" And you can incorporate a Sunday school song like, "Who made the birds? God did," right? So you're constantly incorporating theology into their lives and to show them this reality of God. Finally, the last example I'll give for this would be, let's say we discipline your kids. Normally, we would just discipline them, we'll spank them, we'll remind them that there are consequences to wrongdoing, but we don't tie it with the vertical aspect of rebellion against God as much. And so my family is learning how to do this more with Ethan, and we are just constantly reminding him of how if he rebels against us, he's not rebelling against us ultimately, but he's going against God. And so we get him to say not just sorry to Daddy and Mommy, but also to say sorry to God. And I know that this is probably something that will take time for a few of you, for many households, but this is what it means to be Christian and to be good examples of, good models of Christianity to our children. Alright, that's the first reflection that I have. I'm glad that Ethan is still quietly sitting down here. Okay, I'll move on to my second reflection. The second reflection I have is more with regards to your own building up as parents. And it's a good thing that we are constantly looking out to take care of our children and to love the church. But you know, as the airline companies would say, when there's a problem of lack of oxygen in the cabin, first you take care of yourself, then your kids. So in a way, I'm trying to encourage you to build yourself up, to make sure you yourself have a robust Christianity and theology, so that you can minister to others well and you can teach your children well. And for us parents, it's no easy task. There's no time to read. There's no real time to just sit down and digest God's word. We're meeting 100 different things. But this one thing has really helped me, which is podcasts, and that's what I want to recommend today. You can check out like good podcasts and listen to the different discussions they have about theology, on the issues of our time. And that will build you up even as you're taking care of your children and doing menial tasks. I would recommend podcasts like the one I listened to would be White Horse Inn and 9 Marks. Right? Recently on White Horse Inn, the podcast, a pastor from Italy was sharing his reflections about the coronavirus situation there. And following on to that was a panel discussion by Dr. Michael Horton and a few other pastors. And they were talking about how a Christian should conduct himself, should live his life in these times, including how it is God we should fear ultimately, including how the gospel gives us comfort, down to the practicalities of whether we should run church, how we should interact with our neighbors. All these things were in the podcast, and it was really helpful for those of us who are listening in. And they don't just deal about current issues, but also like deeper doctrinal issues like the issue of Gnosticism. That's one that I really remembered was impactful to me. And Gnosticism is something that we practice in our Christianity today, even though it was an ancient heresy. And certain thinking that we have in our Christian circles, such as separation between the mind, the body, and the soul and the spirit, is one example of this Gnosticism. Gnosticism seems very, mild and not harmful on the surface level, but in fact, to have a theology of this separation of mind, body, and soul and spirit will then eventually lead to a compromise in many other areas. For example, the doctrine of revelation, for example, the doctrine of Christ, right, and how we understand sanctification. So it's good to hear these topics being discussed. And in fact, it will lead you to want to read up more on these topics. So if I can encourage you, subscribe, listen to podcasts that will really interest you and will build you up. And you can do multiple things that way. Of course, your concentration won't be perfect. And often you will want to just ask your spouse to take care of the kid for a while as you re-listen to a certain segment of the podcast. But most certainly, the intent is there, which is to build yourself up, and in doing so, you're able to build your family and your children up as well. These are the two reflections from me. Okay, so as I can repeat again, firstly, making sure that you're not just babysitting your children, but constantly being intentional about building them up in the knowledge of God and presenting the reality of God in their lives. And secondly, yourself, in building yourself up in ways that you can build yourself up. So that's all from me, and I hope to see you again soon in the next episode, well, if there is one, of CRC Stays at Home. Bye!